Run on over to the Twin Peaks hotline. We got a special guest aboard. He is a former NFL running back drafted in the second round out of Virginia and played in the league for 9 seasons with the New York Football Giants. Nowadays, he's the host of Tiki and Tierney on CBS Sports Radio, and that's Tiki Barber. Tiki, how's it going?
I'm fantastic, CD. How are you?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. Appreciate you coming on. And I want to talk about your career to kind of start things off. Obviously, you were, as I mentioned, drafted in the second round out of Virginia. What was that day like? Because obviously now with the draft, how much of a big deal it is with days, if not weeks of coverage leading up to it. What was that whole experience like for you?
Yeah, no, it's a good point because nowadays the draft is an enormous spectacle, and there's people everywhere. There's all kinds of things going on. But when I got drafted, me and my brother were playing golf down in Charlottesville. You know, just waiting for a phone call on a cell phone. We were one of our few friends that had a cell phone, and so it's changed a lot. But I remember it being like the culmination of everything coming together, but also a little bit of sadness because I knew that unless something miraculous happened, I was not going to be teammates with my brother anymore.
And you bring up the fact you had the cell phone. Obviously, this was 1997 when you got drafted. What kind of phone was that? Was it like the old brick Zach Morris cell phone, or was it a little bit smaller?
Yes, no. We were in a golf cart with the brick in the whatever the holder up there, it snapped into the cell phone with a cord. So it had a brick, a cord, and a like the old school big cell phone handle. And it was corny as hell, but it was cool. You know, we were able to play golf and I got drafted at the same time. The unfortunate thing is we had to wait like another 2 hours before Rondé finally got drafted. We were at the restaurant having some beers by then.
I was about to say, did y'all finish the round before the second call came around?
Yeah, we finished, and he was getting nervous for a second. He was like, "Hey, what's happening? What's going on here?" Because it felt longer than it actually was. But he ended up in a good place and had an unbelievable career, and he's now a finalist for the Hall of Fame. So everything worked out.
We'll get to Rondé in a little bit because I want to have some fun with that. But you had a big breakout year in 2000 with the Giants, putting up over 1,000 yards rushing for the first time in your career. Certainly wouldn't be the last at 8 touchdowns as the Giants made their way to the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Ravens. What were some of your memories you had on the run-up to that big game? After you won the NFC Championship and kind of, because if I'm not mistaken, back then it was still that week off between then and the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, it definitely was. And it kind of hurt us that week off. But, I mean, if you back up into that season, we were playing pretty poorly in the middle. And remember, Coach Fossil gave his whole, I'm pushing my chips to the center of the table. This team is going to the Super Bowl. And we went on a run. We won 6 games in a row, including, getting in the postseason and dominating the Vikings 41 to donut, as they like to call it, in the championship game. But the Baltimore Ravens, they were banged up in their AFC championship game. And, because of that week break, they were able to get healthy, and once the game started, it was, I tell people, Ray Charles sang America's Beautiful, and he was on our sideline, and I was standing there like, man, this is unbelievable. It went 100% downhill from that point on. They destroyed us in that game.
It was absolutely amazing, that ball game with Jason Sehorn, Trent Dilfer squaring off, and I think obviously, that day of, I think that's really where we're at in terms of the timeline. Fast forward to the big day. What was that like as you got on the field to warm up and you're just sitting there kind of getting ready, stretching out, all that stuff? And you kind of just start to realize that you are at the pinnacle of the great sport of football.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's because it's what you dream of as a kid, and you think about all the plays, the play acting, and the putting the crowd in your mind and the announcer in your head, and now you're actually doing it, and it's hard to just make it a game. Right? It's hard to just say, this is just another game. We just have to win this game like we have any other game. You get distracted by the fanfare, the national anthem, and the really good ones and the good teams are able to block that out. And ultimately they win. We didn't do that well enough. Not to mention we played a Baltimore Ravens defense. It's probably one of the top 5 of all time in the history of the game with how dominant they were and how many stars they had on that team.
Talk right now with Tiki Barber, host of Tiki and Tierney, also former New York Giants running back. And looking at, you continue to have big years in the league as the 2000s started to go on. Obviously, Eli Manning comes into the league, drafted then by the Chargers, and then traded to New York in 2004. What was he like as he started his NFL career and was kind of really thrust into the spotlight? Obviously, New York, a big major media market, but what was he like kind of being thrust into that spotlight as a starting quarterback for New York's team?
Yeah, I kind of felt for Eli early in his career because they gave him basically the entire playbook, said learn it, and then 9 weeks in, all right, you're the guy. And I mean, they wanted him to learn on the fly, and it was a little bit frustrating for some of us veterans because, Kurt Warner, who a lot of people thought was washed up, was a guy, and we knew that he had Super Bowl pedigree and he had experience, but they developed Eli. And here's the interesting thing, though, as much as he looked lost that first year, the second year and the subsequent years, it was exponential growth. Like he picked it up really quickly, and the success started to follow. And it was only a matter of time before he won a Super Bowl, which he obviously did in 2007.
And speaking of that 2007, it's like you were looking at my notes. You retired after the 2006 season, and the Giants wound up winning the Super Bowl in one of the most memorable games probably in the history of the NFL. Did you have any regrets about hanging it up when you did, or was it just like, you know what, I think this is time?
No, it was a couple of things. One, physically, I was getting the crap beat out of me. I was getting like 400 touches a year as a receiver, as a runner and a receiver, and my body was just starting to slow down. But I think worse is I didn't want to put in the work anymore to get ready. I mean, I'm naturally 185 or so pounds. I was playing at 215, and so putting on all that muscle and training in the off season was grinding to me. And then there were other opportunities that I saw out there in media and business that I was just really excited to get after. And, I thought the Giants were still a couple of years away from being Super Bowl viable, and they went and won. The crazy thing is I was covering the game for NBC, and I was down on the field afterwards, and it was like every one of those guys was my teammate. So, I didn't get a ring, but I felt like I celebrated it with them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I can about imagine what that was like. Talk right now with Tiki Barber, host of Tiki and Tierney on CBS Sports Radio. And speaking of that, you majored in business when you were at the University of Virginia, Tiki. And, it's really crazy to think how you've managed to turn your career from being focused in business at University of Virginia, then you have your long NFL career. How did you get into the crazy business of sports media, now part of the highly successful show on CBS Sports Radio, Tiki and Tierney?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I went to school to study database design and management. I was an MIS major. I wanted to work for Oracle or Microsoft or something like that. But my second or third year at UVA, I got an opportunity, and I took off with it, and it changed the trajectory of my professional career. But I got into media because early in my career, I wasn't great. I mean, I was good. I was okay, but I wasn't great. And so being in New York, there were just opportunities after opportunities. And interestingly, my current boss at CBS Sports Radio hired me in 1999 to do overnights on WFAN. And I loved it. I learned that I like to talk. I like to have conversations with people. And I just started to grow throughout the course of my season, my career. And as I got better as a player, the opportunities in media got bigger and bigger. And when I decided to retire, I stepped right to NBC and the Today Show, and now I'm at CBS Sports Radio. So it's a weird journey, but I've loved it. And the ups and downs and the trials have been something I cherish.
All right, I want to kind of rewind back to what we were talking about with University of Virginia, because recently National Signing Day had just passed. Obviously, not nearly as big of a deal as it is now. What was that like whenever you committed to University of Virginia, and did you have any other offers with a lot of other more notable programs?
Oh yeah. Clemson was heavy at us, as was the University of Michigan. UCLA sent us a couple of inquiries, but we really shut that down early because we didn't want to go to the West Coast. Penn State was probably the front runner for a long time until their running back coach Jim Caldwell left and took the head coaching job at Wake Forest, and then nobody picked us up. I think Penn State was the team that we probably were leaning towards because it's Penn State in the 90s. It's like the deal. But we lost our recruiter and nobody picked us up. And so as a result, we ended up committing to Virginia after our trip to Michigan got snowed out. The coach called us and was like, "Oh, sorry, you guys can't come because we have like 3 feet of snow." And Rondé and I were like, "Yeah, I think we're good. we don't want to go up there." And so we committed to Virginia about a week later, and it was one of the best decisions that we've both ever made in our lives.
Talking right now with Tiki Barber. Got a couple more questions for you. And obviously, we need to kind of fast forward to 2021. It's great to look back at the old days, but I think it's time to look ahead to the big game tomorrow night. Who you got, Chiefs or Bucks?
I like the Buccaneers. I think they're balanced on offense and defense. They have guys that can get after the quarterback, and Shaq Barrett and JPP and Vita Vea in the middle of that defensive front. And they're young, but they have good coverage players as well. So I'm gonna say the Bucks are gonna find a way to unseat the defending champions, and I know I also have to preface this with saying I'm biased because Bruce Arians is like family to me. He was roommates with my dad at Virginia Tech, and so I want to see him win in a bad way, but I do think they have the ability to do it as well.
Any stories that your dad shared with you about him, Bruce Arians, when he roomed with him?
Yeah, it's funny. We had Bruce on our show earlier this week, and he used to tell a story about how my dad was the first black athlete in the dorms, in the athletic dorms, and roommates with Bruce. And Bruce would say, "Your dad was always accepted because he was dressed to the nines. He always looked great, and he had a radio, which was rare back in the late '60s and early '70s. So I'm sure they had fun being roommates. Salt and pepper, they used to call themselves."
All right, I got one more for you before we get out of here, Tiki. It's more on the lighter side. Obviously, you and your twin brother, Rondé, had a long career, and he won with the Tampa Bay Bucks, earned a Super Bowl ring in the process. Like early on, especially after you got the Super Bowl ring, was there kind of some banter in the Barber household when the family got together when it comes to that?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, what's interesting? Early on there was. Now there isn't. He never brings out his ring. He doesn't even bring it up really that much. But when he first won it, it was a big deal, especially because we were both playoff teams that year, and we had a wild card game against the San Francisco 49ers that we were winning by, I think, 24 points. And if we had won that game, we would have went and played the Buccaneers in the divisional round. Unfortunately, we collapsed epically, and so I was down in Tampa to watch him beat the 49ers, and then I was in Philly to watch him beat the Eagles in the championship game as well. So, yeah, there's trash talking, but at the end of the day, I always have his back, and he always has mine.
It's great to hear, Tiki. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk to you down the road, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Appreciate you, CD. Be well.